It was one of those nights, when you just can't get back to sleep and you're lying there thinking about all your problems. And then all of a sudden you remember that you have an important test tomorrow that you totally forgot about. And then you panic because if you don't pass this test, you'll fail your entire degree and your parents will be really disappointed in you. And you just start to cry because you can't get back to sleep and you're not going to pass the test. I toss and turn, but it's no use. I'm 30 years old and I've had sleep paralysis before, so I knew that if I tried to move, it wouldn't do anything. I tried to convince myself that I didn't need to take this test to succeed in life and that my parents loved me no matter what. But it wasn't helping. Then all of a sudden, the room around me started to fade away. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. It was like I was underwater. I don't know how long it lasted, but suddenly the darkness around me turned into a tiny crack of light. At first, it was too blinding for me to see anything, but after a few seconds, my eyes adjusted and I realized I was in a coffin. The first thing I noticed was that I couldn't move. I tried to move my hand a little bit, and it felt like there was concrete on top of me. I tried screaming again, but no sound came out. Then I started to panic. I started scratching at the wood. I scratched and scratched until my nails bled. And then I heard it. The sound of soil hitting the wood. I stopped moving and listened. The scratching continued. It sounded like someone was digging above me, and then I heard it again. This time it was a voice. It said, "Hello." It sounded like it was right above me. I tried to answer, but no sound came out. It scratched again. "Hello?" It said again, a little louder this time. "Are you okay?" I nodded my head frantically, but obviously that didn't do anything. Then I thought, why don't I try to move? So I took a deep breath and pushed against the lid of the coffin. I heard a loud crack and the voice screamed, "No!" I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't stopped, but I pushed with all my might and the lid of the coffin burst open. Soil came crumbling down and I was met with a blinding white light. Then I woke up in my bed. I sat there for a moment trying to catch my breath. I looked down at my hands and they were covered in dirt. I tried to calm myself down. It was just a dream, I told myself. You were just having sleep paralysis, you idiot, I thought. But then I remembered the voice. Who was that? I asked myself, was it just part of the dream? No, it was real. I could still hear it in my head. "Are you okay?" Then I heard something else. There was scratching in my wall. At first I thought it was just a mouse or something, but then I remembered the sound from the dream. I started to panic again and I ran out of my room. I didn't even bother to turn on the lights. I ran to the bathroom and locked myself inside, and then I heard it again. The scratching, it was coming from inside the wall next to me. I don't know how long I stayed in that bathroom, but eventually the scratching stopped and I went back to my room. I haven't slept in my own bed since. That was terrifying. I think it was scarier than most horror stories because it was based off of a real fear. I'm terrified of being buried alive. If that happened to me, I would definitely die knowing I wouldn't be able to get out of that coffin. I would probably just rip the nails out of my fingernails trying to escape. What about you? Is there any way you'd rather die? I'd love to hear some of your dark thoughts. Leave them in the comments below. The first time I ever had a nightmare, I was only 7 years old. My parents decided to leave me with a babysitter for the night while they went out to celebrate their anniversary. I remember it was a Friday, so maybe they went out for some drinks and dancing after. But all I remember is that before they left, they gave me a kiss and told me how much they loved me and not to come out of my room until they got back, and then they were gone. For a while, everything was fine. The babysitter, whose name was Maria, came with us often, so I wasn't nervous having her watch me for the night. We watched TV together, ate popcorn, and talked about the next day, which was Saturday, meaning I could stay up late and watch whatever I wanted. When Maria turned off the lights to go to sleep, I asked if I could have the TV on for a bit longer, but she said no and reminded me that my parents would get mad if I didn't sleep in my bed, so I agreed. After she left my room, I tried to make myself comfortable under the covers, but it was no use. The more I tried to sleep, the more my mind raced with thoughts. What if there was a power outage and I couldn't see? What if an intruder came in and took me away? What if my parents forgot about me and never came home? These thoughts mixed with the darkness made me feel scared and alone. So I got out of bed and went to my window to look out into the dark night. That's when I saw it, a dark figure standing across the lawn. I described the person to Maria the next morning, but she just laughed and said it must have been my imagination. Well, that was impossible because I was still scared. And now I couldn't get the image of that person out of my head. So when Maria went out of my room again, I got up and went to her closet to hide. I stayed in there for what felt like hours until I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. The closet door opened and I froze in fear. Standing in front of me was the dark figure I had seen outside, but it wasn't just a person. It was a woman who looked exactly like Maria, but with dull, lifeless eyes. Her skin was pale and her hair covered her face. All I could do was scream as she slowly reached out towards me with her long, bony fingers. Then suddenly, another voice echoed through the room, startling both me and the woman. "Who's in here?" The woman instantly vanished. The closet door slammed shut and I heard heavy footsteps running away. That's when I let out the biggest scream I could. In the morning, my parents rushed into my room asking what happened. I told them about the woman in the closet, and they immediately called the police. When they went to check on Maria, they found her lying on the floor in a sleeping bag. She had a big cut on her arm and was completely unconscious. After that, things took a turn for the worst. They took Maria to the hospital, but she never woke up. Now, every time I close my eyes, I can still see that woman standing in the closet. My parents say I've imagined the whole thing, but I know what I saw. The one who came to my room that night wasn't our babysitter. Whoever it was, it must have been after her, but why? I'm a 17-year-old girl. My younger brother disappeared for 3 days. We searched everywhere. Then one night, he just walked back in, calm, silent, and cold to the touch. I hugged him, but he didn't hug back. I said, "Do you know who I am?" He looked at me and smiled. "No, but I like your skin." Then he started crawling on the ceiling. It all started on a Tuesday. My brother, Tommy, didn't come home from school. Now, this isn't out of character for Tommy. He skips school a lot and spends the night at his friend S houses or goes camping in the woods behind our house. But this time was different. This time, Mom and Dad were really worried. They called all his friends, but none of them had seen him. So they contacted the police and filed a missing persons report. The next 2 days were a blur of searching. Our normally quiet house was filled with yelling and crying, and the TV was always blaring with news reports about Tommy's disappearance. The police had a few leads, but nothing panned out. And as the hours turned into days, my parents grew more and more desperate. They put up missing persons posters all around town and begged anyone who knew anything to come forward. I even got involved, going door to door in our neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen my little brother. But still, there was nothing. And by Friday, when the sun began to set earlier, fear started to creep into my heart. Tommy would never stay away this long. Not ever. He loved our dog, Sparky, more than anything in the world, and he would never miss Sparky's bedtime. Well, except that one time he did. Remember the time he brought home that pet snake? And we couldn't find him for 2 whole days? Oh God, not this again. What if something happened to him? What if someone did something to him? Then right as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, I saw him. Tommy was walking up our driveway. Relief flooded through me, and I ran to the front door, flinging it open before he even reached the steps. "Tommy," I screamed, and I ran into his arms. It felt so good to feel his small body pressed against mine. But then I noticed something was wrong. His eyes were blank and he wasn't making any sound. I tried to say his name again, but no sound came out. My throat was hoarse from all the screaming. I could feel my fingers digging into his shoulder, but it was like he wasn't even there. He was icy cold, like a corpse. I pulled back, startled, and that's when I saw the smile creeping onto his face. He tilted his head, looking me up and down. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. Something in my brain snapped. Of course I knew who he was. It was my brother. It had to be. But the monster standing before me wasn't my sweet little brother. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't make a sound. I don't know how long we stood there staring at each other. It felt like hours, but it was probably only seconds. "No," I finally croaked out. "Who are you?" He smiled wider, if that was even possible. "I don't know who I am," he said, and he took a step toward me. "But I like your skin." I screamed and backed away. He kept advancing, and I could have sworn he snarled. Then he leaped. Startled, I turned and ran into the house, slamming the door behind me. I don't know what I was trying to do. Hide? Run away? I don't know. As I turned to flee, I saw him drop from the ceiling, hit the floor, and land on all fours. Then he began to crawl, inching closer and closer to me. I screamed and backed away until I hit the wall. He kept coming, his eyes never leaving mine. And that's when I noticed something else. His hands were covered in what looked like hundreds of tiny little pebbles. They were stuck to his skin, and as he continued to crawl, some of them fell off, hitting the floor with tiny little clinks. That's what hit me, literally. He wasn't crawling. He was climbing, and the pebbles, they weren't pebbles at all. They were small pieces of glass. My eyes widened in horror as I realized what he really was. It wasn't my brother. It was something that had taken my brother's place, something that looked exactly like him, but it wasn't him. Whatever it was coming for me. And as it reached out a hand covered in glass shards, I knew I had only one thing left to do: run.
Welcome to my channel. This is a true story about a coffin. It was one of the scariest things that I have ever experienced. I was 25 years old at the time, and I was working as a roofer. One of my best friends, let's call him Harry, worked with me. Harry was a bit of a joker, and he was always playing tricks on people. So it was around 3:30 in the afternoon on a Friday, and we had just finished a long job. We were both exhausted, and we were driving home in silence. Suddenly, Harry turned to me and said, "Just pull over." I was confused, but I pulled over on the side of the road, and he said, "I need you to get out of the car and close your eyes. Just trust me." I thought he was playing some kind of prank, but he looked serious. So I closed my eyes and waited for him to say something funny, but he didn't. Instead, I heard him rummaging around in the car, and then he started to speak. "This is not a joke, John. I am serious. Listen to me carefully. When you hear the sound of a car horn 3 times, start running away from the car. Run as fast as you can, and don't look back." I opened my eyes and asked him what the hell he was talking about. He just kept telling me to run when I hear the horn 3 times. And then he drove off. I sat in the car for a few minutes thinking about what he said. I decided to drive home instead of sitting there waiting for something to happen. The whole way home, I kept listening for a car horn, but I didn't hear anything. The next morning, I told my boss that I wasn't feeling well, and I took the day off work. I called Harry to ask if he wanted to go to the lake with me and a couple of other friends. We were going to go boating and fishing. Harry said, "No, thanks. I have plans later today, but go have fun. Tell everyone I said goodbye." And then he hung up. That was strange. I thought maybe he was still messing with me about what happened the day before. Later that evening, I got a call from one of my other friends who was at the lake. He said, "Where's Harry? He was supposed to be here an hour ago." I told him that Harry said he had plans, and that he told us to go ahead without him. My friend said, "Oh, okay. I thought you guys were hanging out together." I could tell that my friend was disappointed because Harry was the one who was supposed to bring the boat. When I got home that night, I went straight to bed. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation I had with Harry the day before. Was he playing some kind of really messed up joke, or was he serious? I tried to shake it off and just went to sleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up. I was in a church. I was lying inside a casket. It was dimly lit, and I could see all these people in black standing around crying. They were sobbing. "Oh, John, I'm so sorry for your loss. May God bless his soul." They kept looking at me like they felt bad for me. I tried to move, but my body was stiff. Then I saw my face in a mirror above me and I realized that I was dead. Then the priest leaned over and whispered in my ear. He never left. I screamed inside, but nobody heard me. They kept staring at me with pity. I don't know how long I was in there, but at some point, the people stopped crying and the lights started to flicker. I could feel myself getting cold. I could feel my skin getting pale and clammy. Then suddenly, I woke up. I was gasping for air. I checked my fingernails and I had dirt under them. That's when I knew I had actually died. I knew that Harry had set me up. He had convinced me to go into that coffin. He had probably done this to a lot of people before. I started to panic. I was sure that the people from the funeral home would come back and put the lid on the coffin. I started screaming, "Help me! Somebody! Please help me!" But no one came. I don't know how long I was in there, but eventually I stopped screaming. I laid down and closed my eyes. I knew that I wasn't really dead, but I pretended that I was. I laid there perfectly still until the sun started coming up. I could feel the wood starting to break apart. I could feel the walls of the coffin closing in on me. I could feel myself suffocating. I started to panic again, and I started banging on the wood, but it didn't matter. The walls of the coffin were too strong. I couldn't get out. Then suddenly, the lid of the coffin flew off. I jumped out and ran out of the funeral home as fast as I could. I was barefoot and I didn't care. I just kept running. I knew that if anyone from that funeral home saw me, they would call the cops and think that I was crazy. I ran and hid in the bushes across the street, and that's when I heard the sound of a car horn. It was the same old beat-up pickup truck that Harry drove. He rolled down the window and yelled, "Get in, John!" I did not hesitate. I jumped into the truck and we sped off. We drove in silence for a while. I was still catching my breath. Finally, Harry broke the silence. He said, "Did you have fun?" And then he smiled. I don't think he was smiling. I think he was smirking.
I'm a 12-year-old girl who just moved to my grandma's house in the province. It's a big change for me because I've always lived in the city with my parents. But since they're getting divorced, I have to live with my grandma for now. There are a lot of changes for me. For example, I have to walk barefoot everywhere. And don't get me wrong, it's not that bad living here. My grandma is really nice and she makes great food. But I still miss my parents a lot. Anyway, there's also this huge backyard that I can play around in. At first, I didn't know what to do with all this extra space. But one day, I discovered this old stone well. It's quite far from the house and hidden by some trees. I have no idea how long it has been here or if it is even safe to go inside, but I really want to find out. So whenever I'm bored, I come over here and take the rusty bucket out of the well. Then I throw in some rocks and make wishes. That's what you're supposed to do when you're throwing coins in a fountain in Italy. So maybe if I throw a rock into the well, my wish will come true. I wish I had a friend to play with. I wish I could see my parents again. I wish I wasn't so lonely. At first, the well was quiet, but each night it got louder. I would hear chains dragging metal moans and whispers. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but it sounded like they were calling my name. I tried to ignore it, but one night I couldn't fall asleep. So I got out of bed and went to the well. It was 3 a.m. and I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe because the voices sounded so sad or desperate, I don't know. I leaned over the well and whispered, "Who's there?" The chains moaned again, and then suddenly I felt 2 cold hands grab my shirt and pull me into the darkness. I screamed and tried to pull away, but it was no use. I couldn't free myself from whatever or whoever was holding me. Then I heard a raspy voice say, "You finally came home, Mira?" I froze. Did he just call me by my name? I turned my head and saw the face of an emaciated old man. He was so skinny that his skin looked wrinkled and stretched over his bones like a corpse. His eyes were completely white, like 2 ping pong balls. He looked at me for a moment, then smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp and long, like a carnivorous animal's. He opened his mouth again and said, "I've been waiting for you, Myra." And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground next to the well. My whole body hurt. I don't know how long I was there, but eventually I managed to drag myself home and climb into bed. I wanted to tell my grandma about what happened, but I was too scared. What if she didn't believe me? What if I got in more danger? So every night I go to the well and listen to the chains dragging. Every night the old man calls my name and tells me to come closer. Every night I try to convince myself that it was just a dream, but I know it's not. I know he's waiting for me, and I know I have to go back. One night I go to the well again. I leaned in, and suddenly I feel cold hands on my back, and a voice says, "Welcome home, Myra." I scream and try to free myself, but it's too late. The last thing I remember is the old man's white eyes boring into mine. The next morning, my grandma found me in the well. She screamed and called the police. They took me to the hospital, but it was too late. My eyes turned white, just like the old man's. And that's how I became the new resident of the well. I'm Jenna. I'm 19 and I live alone in a dorm. It's pretty nice. I mean, yeah, it's a little bit creepy sometimes, but it's really quiet and no one ever comes to my room unless I invite them. So I have peace and quiet. It was about 2 a.m. I was messing around taking mirror selfies because that's what girls do at 2 a.m. when they bored. I took a couple shots and then I noticed something weird in the reflection. My face in the mirror was smiling, but I wasn't smiling. I was just making a normal face so I could take a selfie of myself. And it looked like my smile was kind of creeping up into my hairline too. I tried to make a funny face to see if I could replicate it, but it didn't work. So I just gave up and kept trying to take selfies. And then when I looked back at the mirror again, it was still smiling. And I thought, okay, maybe I just imagined it. But then I saw it move. The reflection moved its mouth and it waved at me. I freaked out and stumbled back. There was no way I was going to stand there and be like, "Oh hey, how are you?" I just turned off all the lights in the room and left. I went to the common room and sat on the couch and started watching TV for a while, but then I started to get really itchy. I didn't know why. So I looked down and my whole body was covered in goosebumps. And I started to realize that it might have been because of what I had seen in the mirror. I decided I needed some fresh air. So I went outside and walked around campus for a bit, and after a while, I felt better. So I went back to my room to go to sleep. When I walked in, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. That was weird because I always closed the door all the way when I left the room. I didn't think much of it. I just pushed the door open the rest of the way and walked in. But then I saw something sitting on my bed. I couldn't make out what it was because it was dark. It was just a big black mass in the middle of my bed. Then I remembered that I had seen this black mass in the mirror with me earlier, and it was smiling at me. So I don't know what I was thinking. I was definitely not thinking clearly, but I grabbed the mass and threw it on the floor. And then I slammed the door shut and locked it and turned all the lights off and hid under my blankets and just waited for morning. Of course, when morning came, I got up and everything seemed fine. The only thing that was different was that my door was wide open. I didn't remember opening it, but whatever I thought, I'll just close the door on the way out. I didn't want to wake up early, so I hit snooze a couple times and then I got up and I walked into the bathroom to brush my teeth. That's when I realized I was trapped. I looked over at the mirror and my reflection was smiling at me. I tried to scream, but it came out as a whisper. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was like my voice was coming from behind me. Then the reflection stood up and it was me, but it wasn't me. It was my reflection, but it was also me. It was like looking at myself from behind, and then it said, "I like your life," and it smiled. That's the last thing I remember before I woke up in the mirror. Hey, I'm here to tell you that I never got out. When people found me, I was standing in the mirror and I was smiling. They said it was the craziest thing they'd ever seen. But I didn't stop smiling. No matter what they did, they couldn't get me to stop smiling. Well, actually, I take that back. Something did get me to stop smiling. It was when the principal came in and he said, "You can smile all you want, Jenna, but you're suspended." And then he smiled.